walking right in front of that camera. Oh, Grandpa wants to see it. Oh, thank you. That's what I need.
There's glass in there.
Give it to Grandpa.
Thank you.
You're too close, you know. She's been 4 feet. Is it focusing? I'll be fuzzy.
Watch me, Robin. Watch me, Robin.
You can
So like her to keep it fresh.
Bob, what is it?
Did you see me?
Yeah,
I saw you, and I saw your bottom, and I saw your side.
What is it, Bob?
What?
What is it? What is it?
You know what it is.
Read the box.
It's a spectral star.
Now you know what it is?
No, I still don't know.
Hello, Grandpa.
What?
Here's the TV set for Grandpa.
Get out of the picture. Here's a father's dustmobile.
Well, St. Alban's Rectory. Come in. Yes, I'm glad to have you come and take some pictures of the rectory. I moved into this house in 1960, and I started accumulating things, mostly by gift, in the early 60s, and by 1970 it was just about as you see it now. One or two things have changed, and I'll try to point out some things as we look around the house. Sam came from St. Clement's clergy house, and when Father Elwell moved out in 1965, that's one of the things I got from St. Clement's clergy house. The chair there was from the Grafton Hall in the Diocese of Fond du Lac, and you'll see a little picture, a little carving of Benjamin Franklin in the cartouche up in the back of the chair. I was told that that was one of a suite of furniture made for the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876, and it was bought by Bishop Grafton's brother, Captain Joseph Grafton, and at his death, Bishop Grafton took that and the other furniture that went with it, and it was in Bishop Grafton's house in Fond du Lac. And Bishop Grady gave me that chair and the sofa that went with it, which we'll see in a few minutes. Some of the other things just are...
What's that picture up above there?
That is one of the Fra Angelical Angels. That and the other one on the other side of the room had been in the dining room of the house at 4243 Spruce Street, where I lived during my 3 years in the seminary. And when I graduated, Father Pavel said I could take them, so I was given that and the other one. People used to take those things home from their trips to Italy years ago. They were made for the tourist trade in the 1890s, 1910 era.
I'm focused in on this table here, and I noticed there's some things on this table. Could you explain those?
Yes, the little obelisk is a miniature of one of the Dorsey monuments in Green Mound Cemetery, that little miniature was made for me by a marble man named Hillgartner in Baltimore. The marble top table was given to me by Father Francis F. E. Blake. And the two little paperweights are copies of a match safe which belongs to my parents. And when my father was a boy, he made those casts of the match safe there, made of nickel. That chair with the red damask seat came from the Stout house at 26 West 25th Street. When Mr. and Mrs. Stout moved out of their house in 1959, I got a great many pieces of furniture, and you'll see a lot of things throughout this house which came from the Stout house. Now, the marble top table in the corner was given to me by Father Edwards. That's inlaid marble on the top of that, which is rather unusual.
Yeah, it looks very unusual.
And the white Indian head match holder was given to me by Mr. and Mrs. Robert Whitehead when they left Orland to move up to Brunswick, Maine. And I used to comment on that when I visited their home, and when they left, they let me have it. The various little bronzes that are scattered around this room were acquired here and there in the mid-60s. Those pictures on the wall, the one in the oblong frame is of my maternal grandmother when she was a young woman, and the one in the oval frame over that is of her grandmother. And the story goes that when her grandmother was married, she was given a slave as a wedding present.
What an interesting gift.
Yes, the three horses, of course, are the famous Pharaoh's horses by Herring. And then you'll see the lamp on that table, by the way, is a reproduction Penumbra or astral lamp. That's one of the few things in this room I bought. I got that in 1962. Bought it from an antique shop in Baltimore on Reed Street. Now there's the sofa that I spoke of earlier.
Let me just swing around this way and get a little bit more light on it. Okay.
You'll notice the American eagle on the top of the carved back of the sofa.
Yes.
Part of the suite of furniture made for the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia. Now the two pictures over that sofa, I hope perhaps someday someone who sees this movie will be able to identify those 12 beings. The first time I saw those, they were framed individually as part of the set for the 1970s series, the Upstairs, Downstairs, British serial. And I found that pair of framed pictures in an antique shop in Cleveland in 1974. I have no idea who they are and what they are. Someone told me recently that they were from the Medici Aesop, but I haven't been able to follow that up. Maybe somebody knows what they are and can tell me. And then going around that music, that gold cabinet there had at one time belonged to my grandmother, my mother's mother. It's a music cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And the lamp on top of that cabinet is a typical piece of the 20s, which was given to me by Father Robert Lorenz. It was in the first place he lived when he was made a deacon in 1958. And he used it for a while and then gave it to me. And the three little bronzes on there were a gift of someone, mid-60s. Mythological characters. Perseus with the head of Medusa and Hercules mocking the gods. And in the front, of course, is the famous dying Gaul. If you back up a little bit, you can focus on that screen. Came from the Stout house at 26 West 25th Street in Baltimore. It's a needlepoint, and it's of Cybele, the Magna Mater, standing on the back of a lion. And then over that is the bronze lamp of Cincinnatus. he gave up the sword, gave up the plow to take up the sword to fight for his country. And this chair here is a recent acquisition that came from Mrs. Allen Stout. She used up until the time of her death. And the little carved tabaret came also from the Stout house in Baltimore.
Yeah, I didn't recognize that. That's new.
The chair is new, yes.
The little lady in robe statue.
Oh, I've had her for years. That little bronze, I've had that for, perhaps 15 years.
And this ticking over here, this clock.
That clock was, I believe that belonged to my great-grandmother, my grandmother Claypool's mother. And that was on our mantle in Baltimore when I was a little boy, living at 403 East Giddings Avenue, and I learned to tell time on that clock. The piece on which it sits is a dwarf cabinet in which I keep my piano rolls, but if you'll close in on that a little bit, you'll see the remarkable workmanship on it, and the bronze mounts.
Well, I noticed there's like a mandolin and some things like that at the
Yes,
top.
little instruments, little musical instruments. I use it to keep piano rolls. And one of the piano rolls in here is the St. Albans Rectory rag, composed for this house by Jonathan Jensen, and currently sold by the Vestal Press. Jonathan most kindly gave us the rights to royalties from the sale of that roll. This is a Tiffany piece, a cabinet piece, from the studios of Louis Comfort Tiffany in Corona, New York. That was given to me many years ago by Father William Ivan Edwards. That chair is one of a set which was in Grafton Hall in Fond du Lac, and Bishop Brady allowed me to take that with me. I have a larger chair that went with that set that used to sit here in the parlor, but I replaced it when I got this chair from Mrs. Stout. The piano I got in 1966. It's a Cunningham Forest model. It's a player, and it gets a great deal of use, and it gives me a great deal of enjoyment.
This is the one you play your St. Albans Rectory rag on.
Yes. The picture over the piano it's one of the Arundel prints. That was given to me by Father Charles Jarvis Harriman. It's called The Triumph of Christ. And a great many of the Old Testament characters are in front of our Lord's chariot, and behind are the saints.
I see.
That wooden statue there at the corner of the piano came out of a very large and elaborate settee that was in one of the hallways in the Philadelphia Divinity School. And in 1959, it was all broken up, and a number of the students got statuary from it, and someone got that one. That's supposed to be St. Agatha. At one time, she held the palm of victory in one hand, and the sword in the other. Now let's go into the dining room. I suppose the most remarkable thing about the dining room is the stuffed peacock.
It is kind of a strange looking bird.
Yes, it is.
It's huge.
The stand on which it is placed was given to me by Mr. and Mrs. Walter Fisher, and that in itself is rather strange and unique looking piece, mahogany. The clock and garnitures on the top of the china cabinet were given to me by Sister Ethelwyn, Sister Barbara of the All Saints Sisters. It had one time been in St. Anna's home in Catonsville, in Philadelphia. The painting over the table there was given to me by the Reverend Mother Virginia of All Saints in Catonsville. It had been painted for Haley Fisk, who presented it to his daughter, Helen Fisk Evans.
Yeah, remember this painting has some unusual eye
Yes,
characteristics.
the story is too long to go into here, but it's a remarkable story about a remarkable picture.
You have a set of silverware at the bottom here.
Yes, that water pitcher was, that silver water pitcher was a wedding present to my great-grandfather and his first wife. The little hands holding the drapery back, the four little hands holding the drapery back on the dining room windows there are interesting. They came out of a home,
Let me see if I can get those in focus. The hens.
the hands, hand, H-A-N-D.
Oh, I didn't notice those. I'm sorry. Okay. Now I got them.
They came out of the home of Mr. and Mrs. Alban Miller at 11 West Cold Spring Lane. And when Mrs. Miller broke up housekeeping to move, I was very fortunate to be able to get those. I admired those when I was a little boy and used to visit there for luncheon. The needlepoint covered chairs came from the Stout House. And that ottoman underneath the table also came from the Stout House in Baltimore. All that needlepoint was done by Mrs. Elizabeth Stout.
It's very fine work.
Yes. Now, back in the corner, lurking there, you'll see a bear. His name is Ursus.
Ursus the bear.
Yes. And he's holding some mushrooms. That bear at one time stood on the bar at a restaurant, now defunct, called the Champignon in Philadelphia.
I remember that restaurant. That was a French restaurant.
Exactly, yes.
There's part of your fantastic alarm system.
Yes. Installed by Richard C. Bryant in 1976.
And have you ever had a false alarm?
Never, not
Good.
even once. On the sideboard is some cut glass, and those two jardiniers came from the Stout House. The piece in the middle is a very early piece of Steuben. The little dog napkin ring belonged to my grandfather Claypool when he was a very small child. I was told that each of the children had a different animal.
I hope this animal isn't characteristic of their personality, is it? It looks kind of fierce.
No, my grandfather wasn't a fierce person. He was a very nice old gentleman. Died at 86.
You got some dragons there too, it looks like.
Yes, they're griffins. They were a gift when I first moved into this house in the summer of 1960. That chair also came from the Stout House in Baltimore. Most of the dining room furniture was in here. Now that is George.
George.
Yes.
Not George Bush either.
No, his name was George Brackenbury. And I found him in an antique shop in Ellicott City, Maryland, and bought him for $35.
Nice piece of artwork for $35.
Well, he was in bad shape and wasn't considered to be very good artwork, so I've always liked him.
This is something I've always found interesting in your house. This is
Oh, that's
copy of the...
anesthetic facsimile of the Declaration of Independence. That came out of the attic of the Union League of Philadelphia. And at one time, there was an eagle at the top. You can see where something has been broken off. And when the Broad Street subway was being dug out, that, I was told, the picture fell off the wall. And that was in the attic. And I,
Interesting.
in the mid-60s, used to snoop around up there. And I asked the House Committee if I could have it. I was given it.
See, also we have some things on this table over here.
Yes, there are two small music boxes, and that marble-top table came out of Father William Elwell's childhood home, and when he left St. Clement's, he gave that to me.
Yeah,
It's
this,
not a reproduction, it's the real thing.
Sort of Egyptian-looking piece.
Oh yes, that under the glass shade is
It's like Tutankhamun.
facsimile of King Tut's death mask. I bought that at the Metropolitan Museum in New York City when I went over, several years ago now, to see the exhibition of treasures from King Tutankhamun's tomb. And I think that glass shade kind of sets it off.
Perhaps we'd like to go take a look at the kitchen, or we have some other things in here to look at.
Oh yes, I must say though, that little replica of the Liberty Bell was given to me by my good friend Jim Perry for my birthday one year. he felt that the Liberty Bell should hang very near the replica of the Declaration of Independence.
It's a good match.
Yes. Well, now let's go into the breakfast room and the kitchen for a few minutes. Go into the breakfast room, which seems to be the focal point of the first floor. This is where I have most meals and do my typing. This room is a collection of all kinds of things. Over the years, I've accumulated a number of odd items, as you can see as you walk around and look around.
I noticed right away there's a device sitting here that
Yes, that's
with a bubble on it, at the top of
That's
it.
a ticker tape machine. That's very old. That's a Edison Western Union ticker tape machine. And over to the left there, next to the Green Mount Cemetery plat, is a Western Union call box. And before the age of telephones, one would turn this, and it would summon a Western Union boy on a bicycle.
So we got a picture up
Yes,
here.
myself with Jim Perry and his son, taken in May 1987. And on this other wall are some of the visitors. There's the late Joe Swanky, and Jim Perry and his brother-in-law Michael. And
There's your there's a notice up here on the top here.
oh, that's a replica of the certificate, the document, which came from the Bishop of Spain, creating me an honorary canon of the Cathedral of the Redeemer in Madrid. That was executed on Easter Day, 1989. I'm very pleased to have that. And down there is a pay telephone which someone gave me. And there's a British Bobby's hat which someone gave me. And a parking meter from Annapolis, Maryland, which someone gave me. And a police scanner. And there on the wall is the map of Green Mount Cemetery, Baltimore's Valhalla, which someday my body will rest there with those of many of my ancestors in that section right there. My tombstone is all ready. All it has to have put on it is the date of my death.
Cemetery Avenue on Spruce Street.
Well, it's Baltimore's Valhalla, as I say. And over here, over the calendar, is the Society of the Cincinnati Eagle. And this is an Estey, Oregon advertisement from the 1890s, which someone gave me in 1963, an old lithograph.
It's almost 100, well, I guess it's about 100 years old then.
Just about. And they've got the entire Estey family in there, with a picture of the plant, and there's St. Cecilia and old founder Mr. Estey and the Estey children. And this chair and the lamp sitting next to it came from the Marlborough Blenheim Hotel in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
I remember that trip.
And my very good friend Richard C. Bryant drove down and we got the lamp and that chair and brought it back in his wagon. I wish I'd gotten more of those. A lot of people like to sit in. In fact, the covering is new. I just had that upholstery put on. And the picture up on the wall there is a reproduction of a Bronzini, which I bought from an art museum. First year I was here in this house. And over there is a stock certificate from the exhibition of 1876. That was given to me about, 20 years ago. And the picture over top of that was a gift from Richard C. Bryant. That's from the Philadelphia Divinity School. Picture taken in the early 1950s before I was a student there. And on the shelf there on the sideboard is a French clock given to me by Mrs. C. Hopewell Warner. And that plate with a blue border is from one of the service plates from the Marlborough Blenheim Hotel in Atlantic City, New Jersey. A place sorely missed, gone but not forgotten. That is, that plaque, 1794, is a fire mark from Baltimore, the Baltimore Equitable Society. That is on all houses insured by that firm. It's a fire insurance company which is patterned after the one in Philadelphia founded by Benjamin Franklin. Now I can just peek into the kitchen to see where food is cooked and prepared.
Plain old-fashioned type of fishing.
Oh yes,
Does the job.
yes, it's an old-fashioned kitchen, but it does the job. That sign was given to me by Ted Talbert. And that's a Indian chief toilet. And this is a Land O'Lakes advertising thermometer, which came about, perhaps 8-10 years ago. And here on the refrigerator is placed the seal of the Philadelphia Police Department by one of my friends who works for them. Victor dog, sitting next to a real Victrola, a Model V. Still works. Recreation at the Rectory. We can now come to the second floor. That picture on the landing was given to me by Father Elwell when he left St. Clement's. And the 4 pictures hanging up the stairway are photographs of the Thorvaldsen bas-reliefs, the 4 seasons, winter, summer, spring, and fall. And anyone who has seen the film Gone with the Wind remembers that in Aunt Pitty Pat's house in Atlanta, she had the same pictures on the stairway in her house. And over the stairway here is my great-great-grandfather Green and his daughter, Mary Howison Green, who was the mother of my grandfather Claypool.
Quite a pretty lady.
She was.
Interesting hairstyle.
Yes. I'm told she was a musician. Now then, turn around.
It's an interesting picture on the wall where the guy looks like he's holding a declaration.
Yes, that's Moses with the Decalogue. That came out of the Claypool house on Old York Road in Baltimore. That and the picture on the other side of Bishop Grafton and Bishop Weller. The little box hanging up on the wall there is an annunciator, which came out of the rectory at St. Luke's, Germantown. This is an interesting piece. It's a Tiffany piece, and this. I got this music box. It's the largest of my collection of music boxes, which I got in 1965.
I think you crank it up, and then what do?
Turn it on.
It's like you have a selection of songs.
Yes, it plays 12 pieces. This one is interesting in as much as it has an organ. The photograph here is of the second and third bishops of Fond du Lac in the Diocese of Wisconsin, Bishop Charles Chapman Grafton and his successor, Bishop Weller. Bishop Weller consecrated St. Alban's Church in 1915. Now we can go into the front room, into my sitting room. This is where I spend much of my time.
Well, one of my favorite things in this room I can see already coming in here is this owl.
Yes, that came into the rectory in 1968. It was mounted by Stachet on Street Road above Philadelphia. The lamp next to the owl is a Tiffany studio lamp. It's a fridge lamp with a Fevriel shade. The Edwardian chair was a gift to Father Elwell when he left St. Clement's Clergy House, as was the sofa. I've had the couch reupholstered. The telephone on the record stand.
Only the most modern of conveniences.
Why,
I
of
say.
course. The telephone on the record stand is in perfect working order.
If it isn't broke, don't fix it, huh?
It was restored by a firm in Lemon Springs, I think, Arkansas. The little print over the lamp is of the gate of Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore. It's an August Colner print, 1838.
Mm-hmm.
The lamp was in my grandparents' house, and then in my parents' house, and then when I moved here, brought some things, my parents gave me that lamp.
Picture over top
Yes,
sofa.
That
A young
was-
lady looks like she's taking a nap.
it's called Sweets to the Sweet by E. Blair Leighton. It's a tinted steel engraving. It hung in my grandparents' bedroom. They called it Mamie and Charlie.
Hmm.
The Statue of Liberty was a gift a couple of years ago. It's just a cheap piece of kitsch, but I thought it looked kind of funny on top of that chime clock. The picture over the harmonium, over the reed organ, is of St. Michael and All Angels in Baltimore, where my parents were married in 1931, where I was baptized in 1933, where I was confirmed, where I made my first communion, my first confession, and where I was ordained priest in March of 1959. And I hope perhaps, God willing, that I can be buried from that very church. This S.D. Reed organ was a birthday present in 1948. We got it in Annapolis. It still works.
Looks like one my grandmother had. Looks like you pump air into it. To
That's
make it
right.
go.
You pump that and it makes a vacuum to make the reeds work. It still plays. We got it from Keeney's Music Store on West Street in Annapolis. And I've enjoyed it all these years.
You think you could play something on it?
Not now.
Okay.
That picture over the table there was painted by General Mulholland. It's a watercolor of the White Cliffs of Dover. And that was given to me by Margaret Warner, who lived on St. Mark's Square, right near our seminary. And when I visited the Warners many times during my seminary years, that picture hung over the sideboard in their dining room. And when Margaret broke up housekeeping in 1985, she gave it to me, and I'm glad to have it hanging here. And I have pasted on the back of that picture the various bits of information about General Mulholland and pictures of Margaret and Mrs. Warner in their dining room with that picture hanging over the sideboard. That chair is a Naval Academy alumni chair. That wooden captain's chair. And I guess that's about all we can talk about in this room. Those two photographs hanging there are of my grandmother and grandfather Claypool. Now we can go into the hall and into the back room. That's the door to my sleeping room. There really isn't anything particularly in there except a bed and a chair and a table and a prie-dieu where I say my prayers. And it's generally off limits. This is interesting. It's a framed medal of the Society of the Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now where will I go? This is the guest room. The lampshade there next to the bed is made of lithophanes, which at one time had been on a gas lamp. And the bed is one of a pair, which was given to me by Mr. and Mrs. Stout when they left 26 West 25th Street.
Nice looking bed.
Yes, the mate to that bed is being borrowed by my friend Durwood Center in Baltimore, Maryland. And that little chair at the foot of the bed came recently from the Mrs. Alban Stout.
There's a little picture up on the top of it there.
Yes, that's Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. It's another Colner lithograph. This little lamp is an Art Deco piece from the 1920s.
Does that turn on?
Yes.
Look like when it's turned on. That's kind of bright and sparkly.
This marble top, they call this a bachelor's chest. There's a lock here, and by moving this panel over, it locks all the drawers closed.
Interesting.
That came from the Stout House in Baltimore. And this lamp, oh, what you're looking at now? This lamp on the desk came from the owner's desk, the Marlborough Blenheim Hotel. That was given to me by Miss Powell, who was Mr. Josiah White's principal private secretary. And when the Marlborough Blenheim Hotel closed, Miss Powell gave me that lamp.
You get a picture up on the top here.
Oh, that's Her Britannic Majesty Queen Mary of England. And this dresser came from Mrs. C. Hopewell Warner. You'll notice there are no knobs on the front of the dresser.
No, there aren't any.
No, the drawers are opened by a key,
And only by a key.
and only by a key.
Pretty ornate on top.
Yes, I saw the exact mate to this dresser as part of the set of a television series, which I saw perhaps 10, 15 years ago, a dramatization of the John Steinbeck novel East of Eden. I don't know where the set decorator got it, but it's the only other one like it was identical to this.
Interesting.
Yes, it is.
So you could get a picture of Whistler's mother above the...
Oh yes, there's Whistler's mother. That has to hang in every house. And then behind the door here, which I'll close, is a very wonderful picture of the Soldier's Return, which was given to me by Father Edwards. Perhaps you can get a glimpse of that.
Sure. Got it on there.
Well, that's about all I can show you of St. Alban's Rectory.
Well, thank you very much, Father. I appreciate this.
It's my great pleasure and great privilege.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Rich Bryant, and I hope that this tape that I made for my good friend Father Dorsey, who I've known since about 1968, gives him many hours of pleasure and enjoyment, and encompasses most of the things that are near and dear to him. He's been a good friend to me.